On the night of June the 25th, 2022, players of my Minecraft-SMP OG network would begin reporting that the server spawn was broken and they were unable to leave or were stuck in a void-like purgatory, also attaching some incredibly odd-looking screenshots of bizarre entities all over the place. However, the strangest thing was that this wasn't the first time such an anomaly had occurred on the server. The first time it happened the week prior, one of the server's admins restarted the server shortly after reports came in fixing the issue. But this time things were different. This time around we were so much more concerned because this meant it was no longer some random obscure one-off bug or issue. This was a consistent bug hidden somewhere in the server, or much scarier, a potential player using a powerful hidden exploit. But what was actually happening on the server? Well, some of the stuff I saw were things I didn't even know possible in Minecraft. Immediately upon joining the server, the very block you as well as all the other thousands of players would spawn on was completely missing. In fact, the entire chunk that block was in was missing too. Now, chunk errors aren't uncommon. They've been a thing in Minecraft since early beta versions, all the way back in 2010. But those are almost always client-side and purely visual, easily fixed by simply relogging. This issue was not something that could be fixed by relogging. These same chunks were missing for everyone on the server and would remain missing no matter where you went. And keep in mind, the server was not lagging at all during this whole incident. TPS was 20 and it was actually downtime, so about half as many people were online as normal. This clearly wasn't the server being overloaded. Furthermore, I need to reiterate that this really was not visual. Since the very block players spawned on was in these broken chunks, it meant whenever players typed the /spawn command to teleport back to spawn, which they frequently did, they would get permanently stuck in a void loop where they would fall over and over and over with no escape. They essentially could not play the server. To other players outside of the broken chunks, whenever a player would walk in, they would simply vanish as if they immediately ceased to exist. A total of 9 chunks right at the server spawn had this anomalous behavior occur. But these chunks weren't just broken themselves, they were breaking other chunks around them and causing strange behavior. Blocks which were thrown into these missing chunks would straight up reappear as if they had warped back in time a few seconds, now permanently stuck in a bizarre looking animation loop. And once thrown, they could not be picked up or interacted with again. Visually they were there, but it was like the void within these chunks had in fact consumed them. Other entities like arrows, even in nearby chunks that visually were still present, were completely broken and would never despawn, constantly in this state of falling and moving over and over. The same went for other projectile entities including enderpearls, which would be thrown and never would land. Sometimes just stepping foot near these broken entities like firework rockets, which would endlessly fly up in a loop over and over, would straight up crash your game as well as cause lag and freezes. One really cool instance of bugged behavior were elytras, which when flown around these chunks never lost their momentum. They were in a permanent state of max speed despite no fireworks being used. They had infinite momentum. Overall, this situation was extremely bad. Whatever was going on was trapping players and causing them to be unable to play the server, breaking the server spawn and greater PvP areas, so even those who didn't get caught in the void would eventually have their games lag and crash. This bizarre incident had rendered the server unplayable, and we needed to get to the bottom of it, or else the server's future was uncertain. At the time, 2 players were suspected of causing this or being related to it. But first, how many of you have tried to run a Minecraft server before, only to have to deal with endless errors and issues when setting it up? Well, if that's you and you want to be able to set up a Minecraft server with just a few clicks and complete peace of mind, then this video sponsor NameHero server hosting will be perfect for you. When you rent a NameHero Minecraft server, you can select a pre-configured build, the Minecraft version, and if the server is going to be modded or have plugins, all with just a few clicks. No annoying configuration, version conflicts, or setup required. Then after that, you can access a variety of mods, plugins, and settings in the servers panel, which you can also install easily with just a click. Once again, no hassle at all. It's so easy. NameHero has a variety of server locations in America, Europe, and Canada, so you can select the best server for your situation. And they are even currently running an up to 70% off Black Friday sale. That's right, you can get a huge huge discount on a server right now, check them out using the link in the description below. The first was a player called Cyber Llama, who was caught by others shooting lots of arrows at spawn, which were the first and most obvious explanation for whatever the hell was going on. But there wasn't nearly enough evidence to incriminate him, and additionally, he could have just been a random player who stumbled upon the broken chunks whilst PvPing at spawn after all. The second suspect was this player here named Esteban's Property, who straight up claimed to know the people who did this, mentioning it was some private exploit he couldn't reveal, that items had a 50% chance of duping over, and that he could crash the server right now. Some very big claims. This was one of the first things I suspected too, a dupe exploit, as alongside the player's claims, he also had an odd looking stash-like base hidden underground. However, after interrogating this player in Discord DMs further, his explanations for what happened were vague at best, regularly contradicting himself, and it didn't take me long to realize he had no clue what he was talking about, and likely just wanted attention, which he later did admit to. But there was one loose end with Esteban's Property. You see, while he had admitted through his own words and actions that he knew nothing, he also sent a screenshot of this exact same strange behavior happening on another server, of which he claimed happened when a lot of people were online and a lot of chunks were loaded at once. Another vague explanation. This new screenshot was now the first piece of evidence that this was not an issue exclusive to my server. It was the first piece of evidence that this might be something much bigger, a global server-wide hidden exploit. But at the time, having no further leads and no idea what to do, I simply concluded that this was some bizarre bug to do with the server or its plugins. We then simply restarted the server, which fixed the issue, and since those 2 days back in July of 2022, the incident has never happened again, and the server continued business as usual. 3 years then passed, the bizarre issue never occurred again, and was simply forgotten about. Despite every other exploit or mystery I've challenged my community to solve, being solved within a few hours if not less, this bizarre anomaly has yet to present a single lead as to its cause. One thing did coincidentally happen not long after my video released though, and that one thing was all of you who aren't subscribed hitting that subscribe button so we can reach 900k subs. No pressure of course. Anyways, a few days after my video released, a user would post about a similar issue on the AdminCraft subreddit, a subreddit for Minecraft server owners. This server owner coincidentally even reported seeing my video after they noticed the issue and mentioning that they had similar behavior on their server like Infinite Elytra Flight. I had now found another piece of evidence of this bizarre issue occurring. The problem was though, none of the responses to the post understood the issue at hand as they had never experienced it themselves, once again believing it to be your typical visual chunk error or chunk corruption. There were no leads at all to be found here. I got in contact with the server owner and asked them if they ever figured out how or what was causing the issue, and they mentioned to me that they never found out what caused it either, and eventually one day it just stopped happening. Over the years since my video and the above post, every so often I would be reminded of this bizarre occurrence and would try searching for an explanation again, but the problem was that it was hard to find people who had experienced this specific bizarre chunk issue and not just other chunk issues and errors which were all too common. Often I would stumble across posts like this, excited that finally I'd found another player who seemed to have experienced the same issue I did, only to find in the post description that the issue was not similar at all due to factors such as players being able to walk on invisible blocks in these missing chunks, something which did not happen on my server. I have spent countless hours over the 3 years since this issue occurred trying to find similar examples of reports of servers with chunks that just disappeared, but I've never found someone else reporting the same behavior again. 3 years and only 3 pieces of evidence of this ever happening. But one day I had a thought and decided to try something different. As I mentioned towards the end of my original video, I concluded that it was likely some server-side bug or issue rather than an exploit by a malicious player, and I had gone about my research with this mindset, looking for examples of server-related bugs and issues. But what if it was in fact an exploit and I had missed some crucial information by not doing my research with such a framework? So I decided to go back through my footage and replay mode recordings from the time to see if I could spot anything I missed, any unusual behavior or just any examples of players doing things they shouldn't. While doing so, I spotted a player on my server at the time named David001, which for some reason caught my attention. The name sounded oddly familiar. You see, during my original video when I was investigating if the arrows were the cause of the issue, I noticed through Core Protect logs that one player in particular, the same David, had shot many of the arrows that were permanently stuck at spawn. Although when I confronted this player about it, he didn't seem to have any idea what was going on, so I wrote it off as being unrelated. But that wasn't all, there was something else. Another reason why this player's name seemed so familiar to me. I racked my brains but came up empty, so I asked some of the server's players if they knew who this was, and that's when it clicked. This player, David001, 2 months after this incident on my server and 2 months after the original video, was involved in an obscure coordinate exploit on the SMP, allowing him alongside his guild named Obsidian to find and grief any player's base on the server, of which they did on September 11th back in 2022, the OG SMP 9/11. Around the same time, another player as Revenge would inside this guild using an alt account and managed to record a variety of messages sent in the Obsidian Guild Discord, exposing them for trying to get the server shut down by cutting off its income, getting the server's PayPal account banned, and much more. This group of players essentially were found to be extremely malicious, utilizing dupes and exploits as much as possible to cause harm to the server, crash it, or try to get players to quit. And as I noticed when going through the old replays of the missing chunks, not only was David online at the time, but also some of the other Obsidian Guild members. When I originally made the video, these players were not yet known to behave like this, and as such, I didn't suspect them. But looking back now with additional information and knowledge, lots of the circumstantial evidence is beginning to point to them being involved in this in some way. This was the first breakthrough I'd had surrounding these missing chunks for some time, and now led me to believe that an exploit was involved once more, one of which only a handful of players were potentially aware of. But it was once again yet another dead end, as almost all these Obsidian Guild members were banned over 3 years ago and cannot be contacted, so even if they were behind the missing chunks, we have no way to know for sure. But it wasn't all bad. Now that I was beginning to believe it was an exploit rather than just a random server-side bug, I could completely pivot my research approach again. If I wanted to find out how this exploit worked, I would need to either find someone who knew how to replicate it, or find someone who had experienced it on their server before. But as we discussed, the issues seemed to be so scarce, rare, and random that almost nobody else had experienced it. To give myself the best chance of finding anyone who had seen this exploit, it would have to be someone who was involved in running many Minecraft servers. So I thought for some time, went through all my Discord friends who were server owners or had done work for servers, until I found someone who I believed could help me out. This is Rootbeer, an individual who is well known in the Minecraft server community for being extremely knowledgeable on server-related problems, as well as server performance and optimization. He's worked on many big Minecraft servers before, currently on Fresh SMP, a server seeing over 1,000 players daily. He knows Minecraft servers extremely well, and if anybody knew what was happening here, it would be him. And I was in luck, as not only had he experienced similar before, but he had conducted experiments around the time I originally uploaded my video to try to replicate this behavior. Back when the issue originally occurred, one plugin we suspected of causing this issue was a plugin called Farther View Distance, a popular plugin used by many servers which allowed players on the server to see more chunks by keeping them loaded but only visually. They weren't actually active or loaded as they normally were when in render distance. Since this plugin directly influenced behavior with chunks, it seemed like a logical explanation for what was happening. But Farther View Distance was used by a lot of servers at the time, and as such I thought that if it was in fact an issue with the plugin, we would have seen many more reports about it. Anywho, Rootbeer was able to intentionally overload a chunk with an absurd number of projectiles, recreating similar behavior to what happened on my server, although not identical. He mentioned that to replicate this, he had to use server-side plugins to load and unload the chunks rapidly as well, and even then, the issue was extremely odd and wouldn't occur 100% of the time. This was now the fourth piece of evidence of this bizarre issue, and I finally found someone who not only had experienced it, but had also replicated it, which is important, as now I had more evidence that this was in fact an exploit, not some random occurrence. And it all seemed to make sense. We saw there were hundreds of projectiles at these chunks, which could have overloaded them as Rootbeer did. But there were still some loose ends, things that didn't make sense. We never removed the Farther View Distance plugin from the server. To date, over 3 years later, the Farther View Distance plugin is still on the SMP, as well as our server's other RPG survival game mode that has since released. At the time of the issue, we didn't update the server, the version of the plugin we used, or anything for months either. We didn't change anything server-side, and yet the issue never happened again. Why? Furthermore, if this is related to the number of projectiles overloading a chunk, as well as getting lots of players to load and unload chunks over and over, then why did the 2 times this issue only happen when the server had 30 or so players online during downtime, with only 5 to 10 at spawn? We regularly saw over 100 players online back then, and for months after during uptime, dozens more at spawn, and yet the issue never occurred again. Furthermore, the only other server owner besides me and Rootbeer who had experienced the same issue mentioned to me that they weren't using Farther View Distance on their server when the issue occurred. And so I am still lost. Were the missing chunks something that happened unintentionally due to players unknowingly overloading chunks while PvPing at spawn and shooting arrows? Was Farther View Distance even the true cause of this all? Were the malicious players from the now infamous banned Obsidian Guild behind this exploit? Or maybe even the original suspect who sent a screenshot of this happening on another server? Is this even a Minecraft exploit at all? I simply do not know. I will say though, if this was an exploit that could be replicated by malicious players, it is extremely powerful in the right hands, as it can render a server completely unplayable at whim, and if it still somehow works today, well, that's an even more scary consideration. But alas, the trail once again has run dry, and after 3 years and doing all this digging, I am somehow only left with more questions than answers. As mentioned, the Farther View Distance plugin is still on my server to this day, both the original SMP and our new RPG survival one. I'm going to put up a $500 bounty to anybody who can recreate it on my server and explain what's going on, more details below. So come try it on my server if you think you know what's happening, and also check out the server's RPG survival game mode, which has custom vanilla plus classes, cool custom enchantments, RPG dungeons and more. But to be honest, I'm not getting my hopes up. It seems my search for the Minecraft exploit that might not even exist, the only Minecraft mystery I could never solve, will have to continue. Be sure to subscribe. Thank you all so much for watching.